Welcome to Still Plays Galaxy of Heroes. This is a methods video on improving your Grand Arena performance, emphasizing free-to-play strategies. But there are some generalized lessons that most players can take from this. So for the free-to-play player, you cannot be playing like spenders do. Whales and Krakens have way more resources at their disposal. They can play in different strategies, and trying to mimic their performance is going to be a way to struggle in Grand Arena. Right now, a lot of players are working on relicking up their squads, working on meta squads, and what is happening as a byproduct of that is the top 80 GP is getting overdeveloped at the expense of the rest of the roster, where you get these very top-heavy rosters where the bottom portion of the roster is very weak, full of gear 8s or lower or hasn't been touched. Whales and Krakens can afford to both develop their rosters high and wide. And I think a lot of players right now are trying to build their rosters high, whereas the way that I play, I am building my roster very wide, very diversified. That's where the inefficiency within roster development lies. If you focus on bringing up the bottom portion of your roster higher, what is going to happen is Whales and Krakens are just going to move past you, or more focused free-to-play players are going to move past you with shallow rosters, and you're going to stay in a band where you're able to keep strengthening the bottom portion of your roster without really affecting where the algorithm is going to be matching you up. Now, in order to do this, you basically need to make a decision. Do you care about Grand Arena or Squad Arena? You can't care about both. Because if you're focusing on Squad Arena, you need to be maxing out everything. I don't think the return on investment is there for the majority of players, especially when you consider how often the metas are changing. So what I do in Squad Arena is just I optimize my roster to get to whatever the closest and best reward tier for me is, and just leave my roster there. So for Squad Arena, that's a top 50 finish for me. Further development here is not going to result in a better finish or more resources, so there isn't a point to doing it. Basically, the resources I put in and invest into a character need to pay out somehow. So everything I'm trying to do is build my roster for diversity, make it as wide as possible, as deep as possible, and make sure every gear investment, every Zeta investment, every 6-dot investment I make in this game is doing something that is going to increase my overall Grand Arena performance, because that's the game mode that I care about. Now, obviously, if you care about Squad Arena more, you can ignore this advice and just focus on Squad Arena, but I don't see a point in competing in a game mode in which Whales and Krakens are the ones who dominate. With Squad Arena, I'm satisfied with a top 50 finish. Getting 150 crystals is good enough for me. But fleets, however, you can't afford to ignore, and that is because of Zeta materials and because it is a lot easier to do well in fleets with a far smaller investment. You can even compete with Whales in fleets, which is one of the reasons that it's nice. You don't have mods being a major RNG factor for whether or not you're going to be successful. On top of that, all the other success you're going to get in this game is going to come from the crystals that you're going to be able to get in fleets. The metas last far longer. Like Negotiator came out basically a year ago, the Malevolence almost a year ago, and that meta has not changed in that time. The investment that you need to do to make a good or functioning fleet is a lot lower. Like the Malevolence is one relic. You can do well with one Relic 7 Grievous, and that's it. Negotiator needs a little bit more, but it's still far less than a Squad Arena team. You can get by in a lot of fleet arenas with 3 or 4 relic characters. Who knows how much longer this is going to be true for, but like right now you can, a 5-star Malevolence beats a 7-star Negotiator, 5-star Negotiator beats a 7-star Malevolence. That can also help you out in Grand Arena. You should be getting all your fleets developed, or at least have the resources on standby to invest in fleets, because at some point their CG will put 2 fleet defenses down. Right now, one of the biggest advantages I have in fleets is that I'm able to switch between Negotiator and Malevolence. That's true for a lot of higher level players, higher GP players, but lower GP players should be trying to get both capital ships while they can. So character farms is the last quick topic we're going to touch upon before we get into the deeper topics. Finish your character farms. The game is always changing. You never know when something is going to happen, like Mon Mothma being released and making irrelevant characters relevant, or Grievous reworks, or other character releases requiring new characters to be started up. Get your character farms completed. There's 3 things you can finish in this game: leveling up to 85, putting all your ability materials on, or starring up your characters and ships. Just finish those things. You can take the time to gear, especially if you're controlling your overall roster GP. You don't need to worry about gear as much. That gear race is relevant to Squad Arena. At Grand Arena, you can take your time, slow down your roster development, and still do okay, which is why it's more important to go after these character farms, because when a character gets released or character gets reworked, you may need to switch your focus and your priorities very quickly. If you have that character already started up, that's one less thing you have to worry about. And when you have those characters finished, then that's just more shard shop currency to get that gear that you need. Like these days, I'm done with most of my farms. I want as much shard shop currency as I can get. I love getting character shards now that I'm done with farms. Since the JKR announcement, I started keeping track of all of my character farms. So this was my big project throughout 2019, was finishing every character. So this was the progress that I made, like going through the Ewoks, going through the droids, going through the Galactic Republic and Sith Empire, finishing those farms to the point where I eventually caught up with the game, finishing everything off, which allowed me to just focus on new releases when they occurred and get them done as quickly as possible. And that has just freed up a lot of my resources since then, where now I can focus on gear without worrying if something's going to happen. So now we're going to really jump into that roster development. And I've been leaving nuggets about this for several videos now, talking about gear level and particularly gear 11 characters. This is where the bulk of my roster is. So 54 of my characters are at gear 11. I have 34 gear 12, 20 gear 13. You can see gear 8 I have 32. That's just because that's where that first real gear wall is, with stun guns or droid collars or carbantes. That stops a lot of the character development at that point. But gear 11 is the staging ground that I'm trying to get the bulk of my roster up to, and there's a bunch of reasons why I do that. The biggest reason here is quantity. I want as many characters as possible. I want to get my roster deep as possible, and it's a lot easier to do that at gear 11 than gear 12 or higher. We're going to take a quick look at my roster, and I'm going to show why I stop at gear 11. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't take your characters higher. Gear 11 is the best staging ground to figure out which characters are worthy of being brought to higher gear levels. So let's take a character like BB-8. BB-8 I probably should bring to gear 12, but look at the gear investment that is needed to go from 11 to 12 for BB-8. You have 2 eyeballs here, a 3rd eyeball here, a stun gun, and more carbantes and a droid collar. That's a huge gear investment. For every BB-8 I take from 11 to 12, that's 2 to 3 characters I could be taking from gear 8 to gear 11. So by holding off on taking certain characters up to gear 12, I'm able to make my roster a lot deeper, a lot faster. Now there's characters like Hermit Yoda as well. Like Hermit Yoda, 2 stun guns to go to 11 to 12. Like I'm gonna do it for Jedi Knight Luke, but Hermit Yoda is the exact type of character I would want to keep at gear 11. Just as survivable at 11 as he is at Relics. because of the mechanics themselves makes Hermit Yoda very survivable. At gear 11, he's still usually the last one standing and escapes on his own. Putting that extra gear in doesn't benefit my roster, but by avoiding that choice and leaving him at gear 11, I'm able to work on other characters and make my roster deeper. And because I had him at 11, it was a lot easier for me to then go, okay, Jedi Knight Luke has been released, he's a requirement, he's already in a position where it's not a panic farm for me to go from 8 to gear 13. I'm only just going from gear 11 to gear 13. And there are other additional benefits to focusing on gear 11. One, it doesn't really affect your matchups in Grand Arena as much. Like, I have a few characters that make it into my top 80 GP, but for the most part, as I develop and make my roster deeper, the algorithm is not taking those characters into account, and I'm not affecting who I'm getting matched up with. I'm just making my roster stronger and tougher at a faster rate as I work on those characters. When characters get reworked or new characters get released, I'm in a position where I can shift very quickly. And the last thing is, it's just more fun. Like, by having so much of my roster at gear 11, I'm in a position where I can actually use these new characters. I can use fringe characters and try them out. I'm not in a position where I need to relic every single character before they become usable to me. Now, obviously, depending on your relative top 80 GP, you may no longer be in a position where this advice is usable, but you can find your own relative point at which the same lessons can be utilized. Like, that might be gear 12, it might be gear 12 plus pieces, leaving off the finisher, maybe putting the finisher on and not, or maybe that's doing what some players do with Relic 0 or Relic 1. You find a point at which your investment in the characters is usable in Grand Arena without hurting your matchups. Because what you're looking to do is have as many of those characters usable for Grand Arena as possible. That's the point. It's not about like keeping your GP low. Like, that might be a side effect, but the real strategy, the real goal is to have as much of your roster usable as possible. The algorithm for CG rewards deep rosters. Deeper rosters win, deeper rosters get the tiebreaker. Deeper rosters can afford mess ups, then you are able to throw additional teams at it until you win. Here's a way to rapidly gear up your roster and to make your roster a lot deeper and start seeing those dividends pay out in Grand Arena. This is a Reddit post. I'm going to put a link to it in the description down below. This Reddit post ranks the difficulty to gear for all of the characters, or at least all the characters up until after the smugglers were released, the solo film characters. But for the most part, the newer characters are in the harder to gear territory because of the chirotex. Now, what you can do with this list and understanding this information is plot out how you want to gear up and who you want to gear up. Like, for me, Night Sister Acolyte was a character that I had ignored for a long time because she didn't have a direct use for me. She needed a droid collar that I didn't want to give her. Sith Raid, I didn't need her, and I already had plenty of good Night Sisters. But for 3v3, she has a good use. Understanding that she's the single easiest to gear character, I put that droid collar on, and after that droid collar, there were no hard pieces, and I could take her to 11 immediately. And within like this top 50 range here, there's a lot of characters like that, where you might realize, okay, all you have to do is gear up one difficult piece, and the rest of it is extremely easy. There's also a number of other characters that might have been ignored, like Vandor, Chewie, or if you haven't gotten around to certain characters, understanding which characters in a particular squad are easy to gear up can help plan your strategy for how to use your gear in the most efficient manner. Now, 6-dot mods. This is something that I've been noticing a lot in Grand Arena is I think a lot of people misappropriate these mod materials. I think a lot of, like, with 6-dot mods, like, slicing a bad 5-dot mod to 6 dots does not turn it into a good mod. A bad 5-dot mod is a bad 6-dot mod. But in Grand Arena, all the time I see opponents with bad mods. So let me show you what I am working with my 6-dot mod materials. Like, here is what I have saved up. Now there's a couple reasons to do this. One, I just haven't found mods that I want to take up. My threshold is basically I will apply those materials if it turns a mod into a 20 speed mod. Otherwise, I leave them below, and that also saves me a lot of very good 15 to 18 speed mods that I can leave on my Gear 11 characters or put onto characters for legendary events or assault battles. Now on top of that, it's important to be aware the progression system is going to change. It's been a year since Relics came out. CG is going to release something at some point that is going to be the next progression within the game. Mods are very likely to be that. Like, the 6-dot mods we get are a tier E mod. The next levels will happen, and you want to have those materials on hand to take advantage, because one of the biggest advantages you can have in this game is taking advantage of meta shifts and progression changes. This is the DSR bot on Discord, which you can use to get a comparison of your roster with your opponent's roster. This is the 6-dot mod comparison with my most recent matchup. I had 68 6-dot mods to my opponent's 77 6-dot mods, but here is the discrepancy in the speeds. I had more plus 10, more plus 15, more plus 20 mods than my opponent. Those 6-dot mods he had, that advantage was meaningless. Especially when you consider that the only other benefit you're getting are on the primaries, but those primaries, unless they're on the right characters, aren't really helping you out all that much. Like, you want the right offensive mods on your attackers, you want the right defensive mods on your tanks, but if you don't have speed to go along with some of those things, as I guess for the attackers, it doesn't matter. Here with my opponent, like, my Jedi Knight Revan is faster, my Darth Revan is faster. And so, like, let's take a look at another opponent. Here is the previous opponent before the most recent one. This was the one who had farmed for all of the Supreme Leader Kylo characters. Again, he has way more 6-dot mods than me, 95 6-dot mods, but loses to me in plus 10 mods, plus 15 mods, plus 20 speed mods. One, you have to be farming for these mods to get them, but you need to also understand which mods are deserving of 6-dot mod status. You can't just be applying them to any character that you get up to Gear 12 or get up to Relics. And again, the previous opponent before the last one, 110 6-dot mods and loses to me in all those metrics. And again, just over and over again with every matchup, my opponents consistently have more 6-dot mods than me, but fewer plus 10, plus 15, plus 20 speeds. 6-dot mods will not solve your mod problem. They are a band-aid. You need to have good mods, you need to be farming good mods, and if you have more 6-dot mods than me, then you should be trying to have more plus 10, more plus 15, more plus 20 speed mods. And because of things like this, it's why I'm less concerned that my Gear 11 characters don't have 6-dot mods, because a lot of the mods that I'm coming across aren't that good. The mods that are being placed onto characters that are 6 dots are unworthy of that status, and in a lot of cases the characters who benefit the most from having 6-dot mods are the very same characters I'm gearing up and putting 6-dot mods on anyway. Next is build your counters, understand your counters. You need to have a plan for your worst case scenarios, whatever kind of funky teams you need to build in order to beat whoever you may come across. Like if you don't have gas or any of the more recent characters, then maybe you need to build a nuke team to beat Darth Revan. Have a plan for who you're going to come across. Like build whatever weird team you need to beat Galactic Legend Rey, but have a plan. This isn't just about understanding counters and not wasting your battles. Like that's obvious, but you have to have a plan for the worst case scenarios. Study your opponent's roster and make sure that you build up the teams that can beat certain characters. The last point I want to make is about Zetas in particular. For me, as a free-to-play player, Zetas are cheaper than gear. I would rather put a Zeta on than put a stun gun on. Zetas are far easier to come by. I think because whales can't buy Zetas, they feel like they are scarcer because they're able to buy themselves out of gear crunches. But for me, when it comes to an event like Darth Malik, here is where my Old Republic were. I slapped those Zetas on. Same thing with gas. Like at the time of the gas event, C-3PO was gear 11, Padme was gear 11, Shaak-Ti was gear 11. I still have my Droideka and B2 at gear 11. But I put the Zetas on because that allowed me to qualify without having to do more, and then I found a way to win at gear 11 because what I can't do is those stun guns that need to go on B2 or the stun guns that need to go on Droideka or all the stun guns and eyeballs that I put on after the fact onto C-3PO, Shaak-Ti, and Padme. That is the hard part for me. And Zetas are one of those things you can put on to your roster. They do increase your GP by, I think, 2,000. But if your characters are at gear 11, that's not really affecting your top 80 GP that much. And you can still kind of stay within a narrow band and build up your roster in sequence. What you're trying to do is build it in stages when your roster is ready for the next challenge. And know where your roster stacks up. Like the top 80 is 13 rows down. So to give you an idea what that looks like in my roster, I'm going to go 13 rows down. Like you can see already in the middle here, we're getting a lot of interspersed gear 11s and 12s. We're already past the relics. More just gear 11s, gear 10s with Zetas. Biggs here is 78. So Night Sister Zombie is the last character in my top 80 GP. But that's how you can have a lot more success in Grand Arena, is by building that roster depth and figuring out where that relative level is for your own roster. If it's gear 12, make it gear 12. If it's low relics, it's low relics. But build your roster up in stages. And if you're losing too much, it means you're too top heavy, and start building out that bottom. And like for me right now, it's time that I get my roster up into like that gear 12 range. Like I'm just walking over all of my opponents. It's not a lot of fun. And I am ready for that next challenge. And right now, one of the things I'm doing is building out those relics because I've spent the past several months getting all of those new characters, putting those Kairos on them. So optimize your resource usage. Focus on building out a deeper roster. Focus on getting key Zetas and building counters. And let all the whales and krakens just move past you. Get deep and wide. Top heavy rosters are going to lose in this game mode. We're going to wrap it up there. I am going to put out a list video that is tangentially related to this topic later in the week. That's something I think I'm going to try and do with these methods videos moving forward. My gas video is there if you're working on the event. This video should be coming out the same day as that. And I'm going to be spending the next however many days it takes me getting Jedi Knight Luke, and I will be putting out my playthroughs as I hit certain gear thresholds. So thank you for watching. This has been Still Plays. Be safe out there, everyone, and be excellent to each other.